Hello everyone and welcome to our channel Dr. Hamza Al-Kinani. This is the monthly political dialogue. As always, today we are going to interview a very special guest. Geoffrey Young is a member of the Democratic Party and he is a Democratic candidate who is running for the US House of Representatives in 2024. He ran for governor of Kentucky in 2015, 2019 and 2023 with huge experience in the political field. Mr. Geoffrey, thank you very much for being with us today. And for our first question, we would like to hear your assessment of what has been going on in Gaza since the 7th of October.
All right. On October 7th, 2023, the Palestinian resistance group Hamas launched a primarily military operation breaking out of the Gaza Strip and actually getting into Israel, where they focused on attacking Israeli troops and officers and capturing as many people as they could to bring them back into Gaza to exchange in the future for Palestinian prisoners under the control or under the custody of Israel in Israeli prisons. That was, I believe, a complete surprise to the Israeli army and security services, also a surprise to the CIA. So after that, Israel immediately began using military force against civilians in the Gaza Strip. Starting on October 7th, the afternoon and evening of that day, they started attacking indiscriminately. And those attacks have intensified between October 7th and today, which is November 11th, more than a month later. And they've reached the point of meeting the definition, the legal definition of genocide against the Palestinian people, with the full support of the United States government. And since then, thousands of Palestinian civilians have been killed, hospitals have been attacked and destroyed or damaged, neighborhoods, refugee camps. All of these targets are prohibited from being attacked by the international rules of war. So Israel has basically gone crazy and launched an ethnic cleansing operation in light of their forcing half the population of the Gaza Strip to move out of their homes. And they clearly intend to move as many Palestinians out of the Gaza Strip as possible. So that's my assessment of what has gone on during the last month.
All right, Mr. Geoffrey. The second question revolves around the impact of the close relationship of the United States with Israel, which is not hidden from anyone, on the policies of the United States in the Middle East in general, and its allies in particular. Can you talk to that, please?
Well, the United States policy toward the Middle East and Israel has been pretty much unchanged since 1967, when the Johnson administration formed a very close military alliance with Israel after seeing how successful Israel's Six-Day War was, that's when the United States became a very close military ally of Israel. Before that, the United States was somewhat neutral. France was more of an ally to Israel than the United States was. But after 1967, all the way until the present day, the United States has been the most dedicated or fanatical ally of Israel. It became a military alliance, and the United States has been using Israel and its armed forces as a kind of a spear representing Western imperialism to use against the Arab countries and the Muslim countries in the region. They've used Israel to cause trouble, to commit aggression against its neighbors, to oppress the Palestinian people, and to keep the Arab and Muslim world divided. And Israel has been fulfilling that function from 1967 till today.
With this great glance at the history that you illuminate for us, do you think that Americans' intervention in the Gaza war was due to its interest, such as Eastern Mediterranean gas, specifically the gas in Gaza, which will be an alternative to Russian gas for Europe? Not to forget the Indian, Middle East, European corridor, which will be in the target of the resistance in Gaza. How do you evaluate this strategically? Is there a possibility for America and Europe to preserve their strategic interest without shedding blood?
Well, I'd like to take a step back and look at the strategic situation from a bit of a larger perspective. Ever since about 1943 or even before, the world has known that the Middle East is the largest source of oil and natural gas on the planet, and therefore quote, a strategic prize of paramount importance in the entire world economy, and it also influences the strength of the US military. If they have all the oil they need, they can basically conduct operations anywhere in the world that they want to. So the Middle East has been very strategic since the 1940s. And over the decades, the United States has tried to keep the region divided so it would not unite and throw off the imperialist powers, primarily the US. So while the natural gas resources off the coast of Gaza are certainly a factor, the most important factor is simply enabling the United States to have a base in the Middle East, a military base. They used to have bases in Saudi Arabia. Those were terminated by the Saudi government. We still have some bases in Syria, but those are coming under attack. They're illegal. The Syrian government has never granted permission for the United States to do anything in Syria, in contrast with the Syrian attitude toward Russia, which was invited in to Syria to help it defend itself and its sovereignty. The United States still has some bases and troops in Iraq. Those are similarly unwelcome. So Israel is really the most dependable piece of land in the Middle East that the United States can depend on for having a military base and presence. I guess Turkey is a member of NATO, but the relationship between the US and Turkey is sometimes complicated and uncertain. So if the goal since 1943 has been to control the largest oil resources on the planet, Israel has been quite important in helping the United States empire do that.
Mr. Geoffrey, we are witnessing a continuation of a human rights violations of international and humanitarian laws by the Israeli occupation state and increasing clashes with the Palestinian resistance. Do you expect this war and these violations to expand? Do you expect this war will extend to the entire world? Do you think countries like China, Iran, and Russia will get involved in this war, direct or indirect?
Well, the first question, whether this current conflict can expand to the entire region, I'm very concerned about that. It's definitely possible. There are various countries and groups, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and Iran, not too far away, that could be attacked by Israel or the United States. They could become militarily involved, and that would be extremely dangerous. Cooler heads are present in Moscow and Beijing, and they do not want to see a wider war, as far as I know. Probably most people in the region and the world do not want to see the war expand, but they also are demanding a ceasefire and humanitarian aid to the Palestinian people. And the whole world demands a lasting, stable settlement of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And that could take the form of a two-state solution or a one-state solution. But I think we'll be discussing that soon. So yes, the danger of escalation and wider war is very real. I'm very concerned about it. A lot of people in the world don't want to see that, but it could happen.
Mr. Jeff, in your tweets you demand that the American and Israeli president must be brought to trial for war crimes. Can you tell us how? What do the American people have to do if we agree with those who say that all support for this war came through taxpayers, American themselves? Do the American people approve of this war? Can you talk to that, please?
That question and the percentage of Americans who favor or oppose the war change over time. And so today, I saw a poll that said more than half of the American people feel it's important to support Israel at this time. But there's a very large minority, perhaps 30 or 35%, who favor a ceasefire. I'm not sure about today's polling results. So the other point is that American public opinion often has little or no effect on what our government does. We don't really have a functioning democracy in this country. So on many issues, 70, 80% of the people support one policy, and the government pursues or implements the opposite policy year after year and decade after decade. That shows how little effect public opinion has on Washington's actions. So to answer your question briefly, right now a majority of Americans say or think they support Israel, but the other position of support for the Palestinian people is growing.
Mr. Geoffrey, can we say that the bigger problem is that President Biden's administration has tied itself firmly to Israel, openly supporting its actions, sending extra arms, and defending Israel from criticism at the United Nations? To the rest of the world, they are already complicit in civilian deaths in Gaza. What do you think about those countries that see all of the US support for Israel? All that they say is hypocrisy. Because when the same thing happened to white Europeans in Ukraine, it's called a war crime. But when it's happened to the Palestinians, it's a self-defense right for Israel. It is a double standard, isn't it?
There are a lot of double standards. So let me start by saying more and more people, billions of people around the world, are becoming horrified and outraged at Israel for committing all these war crimes, bombing hospitals and children, and at the United States for supporting Israel blindly and uncritically. President Biden, if he wanted, could end this genocide with a phone call, but so far he has refused to do it. Now, in Ukraine, I don't know if it's a double standard or not. My assessment of that war has been that the United States and NATO started the military conflict, the fighting in Ukraine, in 2014. 9 years ago, when they launched the coup, or helped it happen, that overthrew the elected Ukrainian government. And since then, the government in Kiev has been a puppet of the United States. It was under the control of the State Department, the CIA, the Pentagon, and NATO, and groups of Ukrainian Nazis who were trained and armed and funded by the USA. So if we step back and look at the reasons why that war is going on, it seems to me a pretty clear example of Western imperialist aggression against Russia, using Ukraine as the battleground. So I think any American who supports peace and who wants to end Western imperialism would oppose US weapons shipment, that kind of aid, to both Ukraine and Israel. And it would be a consistent position, not a double standard.
Okay, Mr. Geoffrey, let's move to the House of Representatives Committee, where the Palestinian American Representative Rashida Tlaib said, and I quote, "I am the only Palestinian American serving in Congress, and my perspective is needed here now more than ever. I will not be silent, and I will not let anyone destroy my words. I'm from Detroit, where I learned to speak truth to power. Even my voice shakes." Do you think that Rashida Tlaib and anyone like her would face any kind of political pressure to stop supporting Gaza? Moreover, can the independent senators and representatives do something and stop this war in Gaza?
Well, I have a great deal of admiration for Representative Rashida Tlaib for her statements and others like it. She is willing to stand up, even if she's almost the only one saying that. And that's very rare in Washington, D.C. Of course, I agree with her position. A ceasefire is needed. Humanitarian aid must get into Gaza. So I very much admire the stand she has taken. Of course she's getting opposition. Obviously, she's getting opposition of, it looks like, the entire Republican Party, except for like 4 voted to censure her. She was supported by most of the Democrats in Congress in that particular censure vote, but 20 Democrats joined the vast majority of the Republicans to censure her, the more neoconservative Democrats. And so that's where it stands right now. The large majority in Congress support military aid to Israel. And now it would take a lot of representatives and senators to change their mind to start pressuring President Biden in order to turn that around and become more even-handed, become opposed to genocide, and to become supportive of an immediate ceasefire. A pause, temporary pauses every day are not the same thing as a ceasefire. They're basically window dressing that don't mean anything.
That's right. Standing for the right always costs a lot. Talk to you, Mr. Geoffrey. You will run for the U.S. House of Representatives in a few months from now. What do you promise to provide to the Americans? What change do you have in your political plans that you would like to apply to American foreign policy?
I have a lot of things I would like to do for the American people and the people of Kentucky. And they will require changing the minds of a great many Democrats and Republicans in Washington. So one of my top priorities is to bring all our troops home. We are not promoting peace in the world with our 800 plus military bases circling the planet. The world doesn't want our troops. They're very expensive to maintain in these bases. And so one of my top priorities is to bring all our troops home and cut the so-called defense budget, actually the war budget, by approximately 75%. And help all of our, help 75% of our troops reintegrate themselves into civilian life and become productive members of our economy and our society. We don't need a military, the biggest military force in terms of annual budget in the world. We don't need that to defend the United States, which should be, and constitutionally used to be, the main function of the U.S. Army, Navy, military, all of the services. We could easily defend the United States against invasion by other countries with 1/4 of the budget that it has now. Now that would help our economy tremendously by turning our resources to productive activities, such as rebuilding our infrastructure, lowering the cost of education for our students, providing Medicare for all in the healthcare sector, and basically shifting our economy from a wartime economy to a peacetime economy. And it would help the world by removing a major source of instability and conflict in regions such as Ukraine, Taiwan, and the Middle East. Just get all our troops home. I think the CIA should be abolished. It was founded in 1947, and ever since then, it has operated as a kind of out of control terrorist organization, overthrowing foreign governments illegally, torturing people, starting wars, and just causing trouble all over the world. We have 16 other intelligence agencies, so I think we should get rid of the worst one. Those are a few of the policy initiatives that I'll be talking about when I run for the US House next year.
I wish you, Mr. Jeffrey, to win and achieve them so that the families of those soldiers can enjoy happiness and comfort. Mr. Jeffrey, before we end this interview, if you have a final word to our followers.
Well, yes, thank you. And I'm going to be following the channel even more closely in the future, and I would recommend that everyone follow the Dr. Hamza political channel to find out what's actually going on in the world. Much more reliable than the average huge Western mainstream media corporation. From them, you'll get propaganda, you'll get the pro-war position, the neoconservative position, and it's just essential if you really want to know what's happening to follow alternative media sources, independent sources. Otherwise, you'll just have no idea what's happening. So I want to thank you for talking with me and giving me this opportunity to answer questions.
Thank you so much to you, dear followers. Until we meet again, here is Hamza Al-Kinani, always to enrich the mind, not to arouse emotion. Thank you.